Hello YouTube friends, hope you're all well. Now a question I'm often asked quite regular is which is best, Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop? Hello?
Hello, can you tell me which is best, Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop?
Yeah, I'm just answering that question to the great people of YouTube.
That's amazing.
Yeah, just stay tuned.
I love you.
How odd? Odder still is that phone never ever rings. It's not even plugged in. So, Lightroom or Photoshop, which is best? Now, to be honest, they are both fantastic and I use both quite a lot. In fact, I use Lightroom, I would say about 90% of the time, and I use Photoshop about 20% of the time. Now, see what I did there? It's only 10%, isn't it? Just making sure you're listening. But yet, I find myself more often than not inside Adobe Lightroom, but there are things that Lightroom won't do, which Photoshop excels at. Now, other photographers may tell you that they spend all their time in Photoshop, and to be honest, you can. You can do the whole, take a photograph right from import to final print all inside Photoshop, if that's what you want to do. But you've got to remember that Lightroom will catalogue all your work. It allows you to correct one photograph and copy and paste those settings onto photographs that are similar. And do you know what? There's a whole list of things. And rather than me go through them at the end of this video, in a series of bullet points, you'll be able to see the differences between the two. But as I said, I use both. And if you subscribe to Adobe and get the Lightroom package, you get Photoshop with it anyway. So rather than me show you, go through all the differences and stuff, I thought it'd be better if I showed you on the computer how I use it. Now again, this is my personal point of view. And as I mentioned earlier, other photographers will do it a different way. But Lightroom is fantastic and Photoshop's fantastic. So let me show you some stuff then. So here I am then inside of Lightroom, and this is a photograph I shot in Liverpool of a carousel that was spinning round, and I used a fairly slow shutter speed to achieve it. Now I'm going to go into full screen so you can see the image a bit better. Now I really like the image, but what we've got here is on this right hand side we have a dustbin, or as you would say in America, a trash can. And that is taking my eye over to that side, or well, that's not taking my eye over there, but it's kind of spoiling the shot, isn't it? So can I remove that in Adobe Lightroom? No, I can't. It would be impossible. So this is where Photoshop comes into play. And I would simply right click on that shot and select edit in Photoshop, and I would take out this dustbin. Now I remember doing it and it was in Photoshop. I did it very quickly just for the purpose of this video. And you can see here the leg of this gentleman is kind of masked by this, as I say, the aforementioned dustbin. So I had to airbrush that out. Now I'm not going to teach you how to do that because the video isn't about that, but just to show you that I can't do that in Lightroom, I took it through to Photoshop and this is the final result. One dustbin removed, one trash can no longer. Now it's a skill that you can, it's easy to sort of learn in Photoshop, but as I say, you can't do that type of thing inside of Lightroom. So that is one of the plus points for Photoshop. Now you may take thousands of photographs and never ever want to remove anything. All you have inside of, and you're going to see as we move along, all that you have inside of Lightroom is the spot removal tool, which is great for very small spots and blemishes, and you can't remove a lamppost and you can't do the heavy editing that this photograph has had. So there's the before, as I say, with the dustbin or the trash can, and there it is removed. Now the way I've toned the colours at the top, I've actually achieved that in Photoshop, but to be fair, I could have done the same thing in Lightroom. Okay, so let's move on to another shot. Now in this shot, it's a shot of a really good friend of mine, Sophie, and she's a very beautiful young girl, but like everyone else in the whole world, no matter how pretty you are, you can always be made to look that slightly bit better with a bit of computer magic. Now it's not cheating, because trust me, it's not. In fact, it's the law. In fact, you have to do it, otherwise you go to jail. So if we look at this shot, again, I'm going to go to full screen on this, and we can see the original shot of Sophie. Now she's got some blemishes. Let's just zoom in. She's got a couple of blemishes. To be honest, the skin's lovely, isn't it? But, you know, it can be made to look better. Now, just inside of Lightroom, with the spot removal tool and the adjustment brush, I took this particular shot of Sophie from what you can see on the screen now to this. And as you can see, the blemishes have been removed and the skin is softer. Now, you may well leave the image like that. As I say, all done inside the Lightroom, and it's fine. You know what, say, just to go through what I've done all the initial exposure adjustments and white balance adjustments, and then done the remove the blemishes and as I say, smooth the skin. But for me, I would take this through then to Photoshop, because I don't know if you can see this, it might be just me, but the actual tone of Sophie's skin, caused by the light, not by the beautiful Sophie, skin tone is kind of uneven. And this is where I would take it through to Photoshop. And as I say, I would correct that, and I would soften the skin and put a bit of texture back in the skin as well. So in doing that, it went from what you can see on the screen to this. Now I think that looks fantastic. You may well be happy with the previous image that was just done in Lightroom. As I say, it's all subjective, isn't it? It's what you like. Now, if I just zoom out of on this shot, I also changed the background colour to a more contemporary sort of skin colour, if you like. So if you go to the previous image, it just had the plain grey background. Now again, you'll see as we move along that change in the background colour and what they call knocking a person out. I don't mean with a fist. I mean sort of removing the background and placing them a different background behind, basically. That is the domain of Photoshop, and that's something again that you can't do in Lightroom. So it's another reason for me to go into to Photoshop to do that. And also, as we move along, I'll talk about this too, is creating composites, because Photoshop is brilliant at doing composites, and that's adding text, changing backgrounds, blending photographs together to create a strange, you know, image that didn't exist. It does all that type of thing brilliantly well, which of course Lightroom doesn't do. If we just take a look at this next shot, and there is a advertisement I made for my studio lighting class, and that all came from that first image of Sophie with, you know, that needed correcting. Now if I just come out of the full screen view and have a look at the history, and I can sort of see how I achieved those adjustments to Sophie. Now this is the history palette in Lightroom, and it records every single correction that I've made. And I can see here that I removed the blemishes, and then I airbrushed the skin with the adjustment brush, and I probably did some work on the eyes and some shadows. And that's what we do. And I can, you know, it records the history fantastically well. Yeah, so Lightroom will record every move you make. And the great thing is that when you shut Lightroom down and reopen it, that history of how you've achieved that look always remains there. So you can move backwards and forwards through the history. Now, Photoshop has a history palette too, but the difference is when you close down Photoshop, it completely wipes that history. So when you reopen our image, the history's gone. So history no more. So I think it's a brilliant thing that Lightroom always remembers all the steps that you have taken to create that final edit. In this particular shoot of Sophie, I obviously took many shots of Sophie under the same lighting conditions. Once I've made the adjustments that I'm happy with, I can copy and paste them onto all the other photographs that have the similar lighting situation. It's easy. Now you can't do that in Photoshop. So you can see there's pluses and minuses already building for each one. So let's take a look at another shot then. Now in this shot of Sophie, I had the lighting position slightly wrong. Sophie's got, how can I put it? She's got so much hair, it's insane. And because my light was slightly to the side and I didn't have a correct fill light, what's happened is the light has caused all the curls of Sophie's hair and projected shadows onto her face. And also, if you look here, the actual shadow from her eyelash is on the bridge of her nose as well. Now, I love the look in her eyes, but I'm not happy with all those shadows. So here's what I did inside of Lightroom. Now, they're my corrections. That's probably the best I can take it. And I've removed blemishes, I've corrected the exposure, but unfortunately, although again, I love the look in the eyes, it's not a shot that's wowing me at the moment. So I made the decision to take this across to Photoshop and make a composite image. And what I decided to do was to take Sophie's face, but to put a newsprint. Now, at the time watching this video, it might not be trendy, but it is current day to have this newsprint effect over a photograph. And that's what I did very easily. Again, something you can't do in Lightroom has to be in Photoshop, because we have layers in Photoshop, and I can lay on top of each other various layers. In this case, the photograph of Sophie on the bottom, and the layer on top of that is the newsprint, and then they're blended together. So we have layers and we have blend modes. So it went from the shot you can see on the screen to this one. Now, it's an acquired taste maybe. Maybe you're looking at this and thinking, oh my God, that's stunning. Or you may be looking saying, crikey, she's got newsprint on her face. But as I say, at the time of filming this video, that was quite a trendy thing to do. So all done in Photoshop. Now, you can't do this in Lightroom. Now, my decision to do this in Photoshop was based on the fact I did not like the shadows on her face. My bad, as we say. But taking it through to Photoshop, I can fix that just by creating this rather unusual image. And I kind of like it. Do you like it? Comments below. Now again, another shot of Sophie, and it's just Sophie against a grey background. Now, I've already done the work on this in Lightroom, and I was happy with it. I didn't need to take it through to Photoshop, all good. Maybe if I wanted the skin, to get all the texture, and like I kind of described before. But the difference with this one is she's further away, and does it really need it? No, it looks fantastic. However, I would like to change the background and try some different background. Now, in Photoshop, there are many, many, many ways to make a very accurate selection. In Lightroom, there isn't. You've got your adjustment brush. It's getting better at sort of making sure as you're painting the brush on that it doesn't spill over to an area that you don't want it to adjust. But Photoshop has got so many ways of creating absolutely accurate selections. Lightroom, it's not even going to bother trying, because its bigger brother, if you like, Photoshop, does a great job. So let's go full screen on this shot, and I'll show you what it did. So that was taken across into Photoshop, and as I say, I just removed the background, or separated Sophie from the background, and that's what it looked like. Now again, it's something you aren't doing in Lightroom, but it's all down to taste, isn't it? And it's all subjective, because you could perhaps prefer the original image with the original background. In fact, they're both good, aren't they? It's just a variation. With this one, I did go in and sort of play around with the skin texture as well. I know I said earlier that I didn't, but I did in Photoshop. And so we can see the before and after there. And again, looking at those two, you may prefer the first one. It's just, it's all down to taste, isn't it? Let's have a look at another one. Go into full screen on this one. And same sort of thing, Sophie against the grey background. Now, I love this shot, but again, because I've lost the right-hand side where the hair kind of leaves the image, I thought, well, I need to blend that in with a background. I used another layer from another image and used a blend mode to do it, and it looks like this. And now that sort of hair that was disappearing from the right-hand side of the shot, it's kind of merged in with the layer. It's been blended together, and it doesn't look as bad, and it looks quite mysterious, doesn't it? Now, again, it's all subjective, but I think that looks great. Composites. Now, I've mentioned composites a few times. This is where you can combine different photographs together. And I used, let's go back to this shot. I used this shot of Sophie. Let's go full screen again. I used this shot of Sophie and I blended it with a photograph that I shot in Barcelona. Now, it's the front of a ladies' underwear shop. But it was in an old part of Barcelona, and anyway, I'll show you. Going on about it, I'll just show you on the screen. So there's the shot of Sophie, all edited in Lightroom, and there's Sophie suddenly appearing on the wall of a shop, ladies' underwear shop in Barcelona, and I think it looks great, doesn't it? And that's the sort of thing you can do. Now my video company is called Moving Pictures Video, so hence why it's got that other logo on the left hand side. Something else you can do in Photoshop which you can't do in Lightroom. I've created that whole logo in Photoshop. This is composites, and as I say, it's something Lightroom can't do. One more image to look at. This is the photograph that came straight from the camera. So let's just take a little look what it looks like after some Lightroom corrections. Just going to zoom in a little bit. And what I've done is I've used the spot removal tool and the adjustment brush. So before and after. Okay, simple as that. And that looks great. Now, I did take it through to Photoshop. I'm going to show you that. I'm just going to expand this shot a bit first, and then I'll show you. That is great. And Sophie was happy with that, and I was happy with it. But the more I looked at it, I thought, you know, that green jacket is a bit too vibrant for me. And also, wouldn't it be better if it was like a teal colour? Now, we all know that teal and orange work well together because they're at opposite end of the spectrum. So skin colour is generally around the orange colour, and so why not make the jacket teal? So to do that, I took it across into Photoshop. Now, the reason I took it across into Photoshop because I want to change the background colour as well. Now, I can't change the background colour in Lightroom, but I can change the colour of the jacket. Now, I'll show you why right now. So there's the finished shot of Sophie corrected, colour corrected, skin smooth, everything done on it in Photoshop. If I zoom in, you can see the usual peach-like, parchment-like skin that I like to create. And the background's green, and the jacket's a more pleasing colour, I think. Now, if we looked at the previous shot, we've got that sort of bright green fluorescent jacket. So I'm just going to jump between the two so you can see. And I much prefer the green background and also the colour of the jacket. Now, what I can't do in Lightroom is change the background colour, but let me show you how I change the colour of a jacket. Quite simply go into the Hue HSL tab, select Hue, drag up and down, and find that sort of teal colour, which is about there, I would guess. You can do it a lot more accurate than that, but that'll do for now. Now it's too saturated, so I would select the saturation tool and drag it to taste. So that's how simple it is to do that. Now, if I wanted to change the background colour, that is a bit more difficult. In fact, nigh on impossible. Because it's neutral grey, I could sit here all day sliding up and down to try and change the colour of the background, and it isn't going to work. So that, again, is where I take it through into Photoshop. So Photoshop and Lightroom, honestly, they are both fantastic. And if I did have to answer the question which is best, I wouldn't answer it that way. What I would say is that you can edit all your photographs, catalogue them, get them ready for print, and do everything inside of Lightroom. And perhaps you would never have to jump to Photoshop. Now, all I can tell you is the way I do it. And I predominantly stay in Lightroom, but as I say, and as you've seen, I jump across to Photoshop quite regular, and it's a very easy thing to do. Select your photograph in Lightroom, right click, and then select edit in Photoshop, and then make your edits. Save it, and it goes back to Lightroom with the edits that you've just created. It's an easy thing to do. But as I say, you can stay inside of Lightroom. So if you watch this and thought, I don't need to do any of those things, then don't worry, because Lightroom's fantastic. Right, I'm out of breath now. I need a drink of water. It was quite exciting, that, wasn't it? Now, I did promise at the very end of this video, I would put a series of bullet points up to tell you the major differences between the two, and then you can decide yourself. But always remember this, that when you subscribe to Adobe, you will get Lightroom, but you will also get Photoshop anyway. So you'll have both. It's not as if you have to decide which one to purchase, because you'll get both. So here is a comparison then between Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop. Now I do say comparison, but at the same time there's obviously similarities, so we'll take a look at that. Let's start off with Adobe Lightroom. So obviously we have a catalogue which is going to house your entire photographic collection if you've set it up properly. This allows you to quickly find your work, specific photographs or groups of photographs, providing you've keyworded them of course. And then you've got collections. Now collections are great because you can group together some of your favourite photographs from different parts of your life all in one little collection. Obviously you've got the sexy part of Lightroom, which is all the corrections that you can make and adjustments to exposure, white balance, and you truly can take a photograph right from input to final print, all inside of Lightroom. You have the spot removal tool to remove unwanted small items. Again, not as powerful as what Photoshop can do, but it does a pretty good job. You have the adjustment brush where you can make local corrections to exposure and colour, and that is really great too. That is a really powerful tool when you're editing your photograph. You can quickly copy and paste adjustments between photographs. Now this is fantastic. Quick example, imagine you've shot a wedding and you've photographed the bride in a specific location. You can simply just edit one photograph and then just paste those settings onto the photographs that were taken in a similar location. All very easy. It saves you so much time when you do it that way. You have the history palette which records every move that you've made, and this is a permanent record of those adjustments which you never lose. Obviously Lightroom's non-destructive, so any edits that you do can easily be removed, so you never ever tamper with the original photograph. You've always got that. It's like having a negative in a dark room. You can always go back to that original photograph. Whereas obviously if you edit a photograph in Photoshop and you haven't made a copy, you could actually lose that initial main photograph very easily. I've done that before, and of course with Lightroom that's never going to happen. You can create an infinite amount of versions with snapshots and virtual copies, and again that is doable in Photoshop, but it's tricky to do it that way. It's much easier in Lightroom, and you can compare them side by side, and honestly it's a wonderful way of working with snapshots and virtual copies. You can add presets, you can import presets, you can make presets, you can buy third-party presets, and you can use these to change the tone and the colour and the atmosphere as you shot. There's many presets out there, and as I say, you can create your own. You can do your batch exports once you've finished working on a collection of shots. You can simply just export them and add in any metadata that you'd like to add. Now Photoshop is also amazing, as I've said many times. Let's have a look at some of the major things, and again this is my personal opinion. It would change between photographers obviously, but you have camera raw. So when you import your photograph into Lightroom, assuming that you've shot in the raw format, you will have an additional window that will pop up. This is called the camera raw window, and you can do a lot of the exposure changes and white balance, colours, etc. very similar to what you can do in Lightroom. It's not as pleasing to work with, but it does work, and as I say, it will do pretty much a lot of what Lightroom can do. That's just on the import. Then we have layers and adjustment layers. Layers, as I've mentioned before, you can create composite images, so you can lay different photographs on top of each other to create a strange image. You can mix photographs together, and you've got your adjustment layers as well. So if you perhaps alter the curves or the levels, that can all live on an adjustment layer, and you can just jump to that adjustment layer anytime you like and make further corrections to it. So adjustment layers are fantastic. We've got blend modes, as I've just previously mentioned, so you can blend photographs together, and there's many different ways of blending to achieve different effects. Multiple accurate selection tools, too many to name, and as I mentioned in the video, there's so many ways to target specific areas and do what you like with it. You can do so much with the selection tools in Photoshop, and of course Lightroom it just doesn't have that capacity to do that. We have masking for accurate local adjustments. Masking is great. You can create a layer, you can create a mask, you can paint out on the mask, you can paint in to reveal or hide certain parts of a layer. It's absolutely amazing. We've got the clone, healing brush, patch tool to remove unwanted items. These tools are unbelievable at removing things from a photograph, things that you'd never be able to do inside of Lightroom. Photoshop can handle it very easy. As well as that, we have the content aware fill. Now this will quickly replace items that you want removed from your photograph with adjacent pixels, and it saves you a lot of work. It's really clever. We have brushes of infinite shape and size. Now this might not be important to you, but I know it is to a lot of photographers, where for when you are actually painting on adjustments, and of course you can have different shapes, sizes, you name it, it's just infinite. We have creative filters to add effects. Now maybe this is not your thing, but at least a Gaussian blur or Gaussian blur, depends how you want to say it. There's many ways to blur things. That's just a basic filter. There are so many filters I couldn't go through them, but maybe creative filters are not your thing, but Photoshop handles that flawlessly too. You can add text and custom shapes, as I mentioned earlier. This is to create composites. So if you've got a graphic design or graphic design is your thing, you can simply add text and custom shapes, very easy. And then we can create or import actions. Actions are great. If you find yourself doing the same thing over and over again on a photograph inside of Photoshop, then create an action. Record what you're doing, save it, and then just play that action on the next photograph, and it will do all the same things you've done on the previous one. It's a bit like the copy and paste, I guess, in Lightroom, but you can actually buy actions online, third-party actions, which are really good. You know, you just investigate it if you do decide to use Photoshop. And then you can accurately enlarge or reduce your document size. Now you can create document sizes obviously in Lightroom too, but I just find that doing it in Photoshop, if I want to make a rather large enlargement, Photoshop handles this brilliantly without much loss of detail. So I don't think it's an either or situation, and as I said all the way through the video, I use both, but a lot of what I do I can quite simply get done in Lightroom, and on occasion, as I say, probably 20% of the time, 10% maybe, I jump across into Photoshop. Quite often I don't need Photoshop, and you know, I made sure in the video that I showed you stuff that I would take to Photoshop. It was pointless me showing you stuff that I wouldn't, because in other tutorials I'll show you how to use Lightroom to do all those corrections. Right, I'm going for a lie down. But listen, thanks very much for watching, and I hope all this made sense to you. If not, leave a question or some comments below. But thanks very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next upload.
Take a photograph and make the moment last step the perfect photo company. Take a photograph and make the moment last with the perfect photo company.